The Good Girl Confessional podcast and WB40, Women Beyond 40, would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the unceded lands on which this podcast and our platform is recorded and researched, the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nations. We pay our deepest respects to their elders, past and present, and we pay homage to their ancient culture of storytelling. Hello and welcome back to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres. Thank you so much for joining me here. I've been away for a little while, but I have been busy chatting with some extraordinary women about their hard-won wisdom. Hey, listen, have you ever been called a slut? I have. I did spend almost a decade writing a saucy blog called The Good Girl Confessional about my experiences of sex, dating and relationships beyond the age of 40 after divorce. And believe me, some people were pretty offended by my honesty and my raw take on it. My next guest is absolutely brilliant because after decades of activism, we know that women are still burdened with the effects of being called sluts in everyday life. But finally, my next guest is Dr. Hilary Caldwell, and she has written this extraordinary book, and it's called SLUTDOM, Reclaiming Shame-Free Sexuality. It's amazing. Delving into topics such as pleasure, pain, empowerment, and including real women's stories in this book. Sexologist, academic, and sex worker, yes, you heard that right, Dr. Hilary Caldwell is uniquely placed to understand what women want, but more importantly, what we actually deserve. In reclaiming our sexuality, she really believes that we can actually move the rights of women forward, and I tend to agree with her. Please welcome to the studio for the very first time, Dr. Hilary Caldwell.
Hey, how about a podcast about all the music that got us hooked up, knocked up and broken up? If that got you humming a hit from the 70s and 80s, then have we got a show for you. I'm Jo Pybus, and when Sandy's not in the confessional talking to awesome chicks, she's driving a Sandman over to my place and co-hosting Alex the Seal with me and Molly, a podcast about music nostalgia. Just search for Alex the Seal on your podcast app.
Hello, welcome to the confessional. Hilary, how are you?
I'm really well. Thank you for having me, Sandy. It's lovely to meet you.
I'm very, very excited about your new book, which of course is called
exciting for me too. Thank you.
SLUTDOM, Reclaiming Shame-Free Sexuality. Look at that. And there's your name at the top. How amazing is that?
It is pretty amazing. Thank you.
Congratulations. This is amazing. And what a fantastic topic. You've written this, when women are enjoying better sex, the people they have sex with will too. So I love that messaging. It's so amazing. Tell us all about it. Hilary, how did the book come about? SLUTDOM.
SLUTDOM. Well, I'm a slut. And I realised that being a slut is a really good position to be in, because having that kind of inner confidence with how your body rewards you, it really is greater than the pressures that society puts on you. So I realized that being a slut was really important to me, but I was hiding a life of slutdom, and that did not feel very good. So I did this PhD about women buying sexual services. It was the first in the world. Like, people weren't really talking about it before that, but they are now, which is great. So yeah, all sorts of people buy sexual services. And I was writing the book about the women buying sexual services and writing about how empowered they were and how they were changing their whole lives. And I felt, I'm hiding here for 20 years. I've hidden the secret of being a sex worker, which is my true power. But hiding your power is not powerful. That seemed, it was dishonest. So I decided that the only way I could really show everyone that sexual power is really important to us in our entire lives was to own it and to come out. And it's, I kept it a secret to keep my children safe. And now that they're older, we've moved on. It's a we can talk about sex a lot more comfortably, and we should, because it's the silence about sex that really it affects everyone in negatively. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how I
absolutely.
wrote it.
Well,
Wow.
and congratulations on, you say claiming your whole self and being able to, like, the thing about the world we currently live in, thank goodness, is people are having these conversations, which is fantastic and important and powerful. We talk about the rights of sex workers, and I think that's important. We talk about the rights of women, I think, to be able to claim our own sexuality and to be able to talk openly about sexuality is so important.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that something that that I've suffered, because every pendulum has a swing. Great sex also can be really painful, and there are painful aspects of being proud of your sexuality, and as a closeted sex worker, I received so much stigma and discrimination in my life. I've been blackmailed and stalked and all of these things, and I realized it was because of the shaming that women receive, and that it was that the way that sex workers are portrayed and treated by society is the way that all women are treated by society. So if sex workers are like the canary in the coal mine, the whore in the world, it shows us how women are treated. And if sex workers are well treated, then women will be well treated. But they've been badly treated, which is a patriarchal plot to try to tell women, to warn women, don't be like the whore, don't get this kind of treatment. So, if we can actually reject treating whores badly, then we will treat all women better. So I think it's important for all women to know, look at how whores are treated and change that, because that's going to affect all women and therefore all people. Because as I say in my book, when people have great sex, the people they have sex with choose the people who love women, and women will be better when they don't carry all that shame that we're supposed to.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, it's such a patriarchal construct, but it's also, let's face, very deep rooted in religion as well. As we know, this thing about good and evil and, the Madonna versus the whore, all of this kind of stuff that women, good, evil, and hence why, the name of this podcast, The Good Girl Confessional, was created very tongue in cheek, that we're all meant to be good girls. But in fact, what the hell does that even mean? And as women, that we've got to claim all parts of ourselves. So tell me how that impacted your life initially. Like, as you said, you were a closeted sex worker, and how your children how did they go with finding out your whole truth and your whole self?
Yeah, well, as a closeted sex worker, I kept it a secret for 20 years from my children, as well as from most of my friends and all my colleagues, except for other sex workers. And that, just keeping the secret was like particularly bad for my mental health. But also that was how I was able to be blackmailed, etc. But I did feel like 20 years ago when I started sex work that it was really important to keep the secret, to keep my children safe from that kind of bullying that slut shaming does to people. So yeah, I told my children when I realized I had to come out in the book, and that was the only honest. It was not only honest; it was like a duty that I had. Like, sex work gave me all this fantastic experience that if I couldn't share that, it was kind of wasted in a way. Like, it wasn't wasted with my clients, but it was. I could do more for women if I broke my silence. And when I realized the importance of that, I realized I had to come out to my children. Oh, that was hard. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But geez, they were good about it. I was so proud of them because they were surprised. And
of course.
And I was a bit tricky when I told them. I asked them for their support, right up when I was telling them. So while they were surprised, I was asking for support, which is hard for them to resist saying, of course, they would support me. And they have. They are well-adjusted young women. They're all mothers themselves now, so they understand why I kept it a secret from them. And actually, that was what surprised the most, that I'd kept a secret. Not the secret, but the fact that I'd kept a secret. Because, you know, I'm pretty open in how I talk about sex generally. Being a sexologist, they've always thought that I said too much. So, yeah.
Yeah, but also
I've been
too,
very lucky.
yeah, I think one of the things that one of the things we really understand now, though, you know, we talk about sex work, it's legal, and the reality is sex work is work, right? It's people's
Yes,
livelihoods, it's their
absolutely. It's
jobs,
work.
it's their roles, right? And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we need to start to view it as such.
Yeah, and I think in a country like Australia, we're just so lucky because about half of Australia has decriminalised sex work, which is
Mhm.
really important for sex workers' rights. Because why should any kind of sex be criminal? Any kind of consensual sex, why should that be criminal? Like, we can have sex for any reason we want. We can have sex except for money. Like, that doesn't seem right. Um,
It
but
yeah.
so some parts of Australia are still criminalised, but because we have decriminalised models in most parts of Australia, or about half, we also have about half of Australians. My research showed me that about half of Australians think that sex work should be decriminalised. So that's a really good environment to be a sex worker in, but also to be a woman in, because we respect the skills of sex workers when we make laws or take away laws which make it more difficult. So, yeah, I think it's a really terrific time in Australia and in history for women to start talking about this and how this can help everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the thing as well. If you decriminalize something, it means that everyone around you gets protected. The sex workers are more protected, and the customers are more protected, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a mark of respect. You know,
Absolutely.
the sex workers can choose when to have sex, when not to have sex, when they're working, when they're not working. You know, we don't need to be rescued.
And that's something that's really worth discussing. Now, I am fascinated, as you touched on before, that you did. So you're an academic, obviously, Master of Health Science, Master of Applied Science, but your doctorate, Women Who Buy Sex in Australia, was the first of its kind in the world, probably. Tell me about that. How did you decide you landed on that as a doctorate? But also to um, how was it received? Because I'm really fascinated to know how
Ooh,
an academic paper about women who
yeah,
buy
that's a
sex.
great question, Sandy. Yeah, it's a really relevant question too. Like, so I used when I was working as a sex worker, when I first started, I was working part-time as a nurse, and I really didn't have enough money to manage my children on my own. So I went into sex work for that reason. And then sex work then funded my study because I really enjoyed sex so much, and I thought it was I wanted to be more analytical about it. So I started to do those studies, but sex work funded them, but also informed, because I sexual experience is a very good thing. It's not just very good for us, it's very good for everyone. So I wanted to know more. So I did the first master's in sexology, and then started working with clients in a clinical, psychoclinical way, which was also really informative and useful and enjoyable. But then when I started doing research it was again because I was just really interested. My first master's, my second master's in applied science was regarding men who buy sexual services, because I thought, there's not very much information out there about men who buy sexual services, and also the kind of information that's out there is really biased. Like, it's just saying men are doing this to women. They're like using their bodies. Like, no, we all have sex. It's not about using, it's about enjoying. So I did that first study, but some women wanted to be in it. And I was just like, oh, no, I don't know how to handle this. And so then I thought more about it. And when I finished that master's, I decided to go back and do the PhD about women. But I had to fight. I had to really fight to get into a PhD program, because people just didn't believe that there was enough women doing that to warrant any study. So my study was explorative, was just really just saying, this is what's going on. This is, we're finding out about this. And yeah, I didn't get funding. I applied 5 times for funding. I had to completely self-fund it. Well, sex work fund it, which was very disappointing after my other academic history. You know, I do think I should have been more supported. But of course, they didn't think that it was a useful study to do. But when it did land, I mean, it landed in 2018 and today's 2024. I don't think there'd be many people who'd be very surprised that women buy sexual services anymore. Like it's been talked about. There's been a few movies about it, particularly in Australia, one, What Women Want, and the one with Emma Thompson, Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, which is actually Grande, which was based on one of the stories in my PhD, I really believe. So I think, you know, even though, and I did a lot of speaking internationally, I just absolutely love my topic and enjoy speaking about it. So, and I enjoy thanking all the women and all the sex workers I interviewed as well. Because yeah, I think it's now considered to be a bit more commonplace. And I think when people realize that all genders buy services from all genders, then we can stop with that kind of really biased narrative that men are doing this to women, which is not helpful. It's not helpful to people who really are exploited, and it's not helpful to any clients of any industry to be stereotyped like that. You know, that's not respectful or even correct.
Yeah, but I think it's fascinating to kind of lift the veil on that women identify themselves as sexual beings, that they have needs, desires and wants, and that they are quite happy. Some women are quite happy to actually engage, you know, the services of a sex worker to have those desires met, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, it's not all about being hornbags, although that can be very fun too. And nothing wrong with being a hornbag. But you know, half of the women who I interviewed were talking to me, were actually categorized in their mind or define their motivations as therapy. And at the time I was thinking, is this a way of trying to avoid some stigma about being a hornbag? Which some of it may have been, but it really is therapeutic. And who gets to decide when something's therapeutic and who has got the benefit and who hasn't? You know, in my own work, sex work, you know, sometimes you just get a really fun booking where everyone just like bonks around and it's just so much fun. And then they're gone. And then you think, oh, that was fantastic. There is everything therapeutic about fun sex. But there's also a lot of therapy involved with that intimacy that we lack in other areas of our lives. But also some of the women that were buying services, I mean, to bring it back to them, they were, you know, 2 of them bought services to actually help them with a physical problem of vaginismus, which is both a physical and a psycho problem, because the anxiety about having painful sex causes muscle clamping that then creates more pain and more anxiety. So, you know, you've got this double-barreled problem. And one of the women I interviewed actually bought services and considered it physio. She was not going to have any pleasure from the experience. She was just going to have the sex worker do the things that would help her to lose her anxiety, which did happen. And the other one knew that she needed to feel the pleasure and the eroticism of the sexual encounter, but didn't have a convenient partner to help her to do that. So they, you know, that was an extremely therapeutic motivation. That was motivations that were fulfilled, and those women are happily doing what they do now. So yeah, and also like so many women have suffered from sexual violence, coercion. You know, just bad relationships in general, or even like body shaming, or like things that might seem to be really kind of minor in the moment, but, you know, they come up and remind you when you're trying to be sexy and you just remember things that make you feel sad, or bad about yourself. So those kinds of experiences that women have, they were using sex workers as well to work their way through, because, they felt that sex with a sex worker would be safer, both in terms of physical violence, but also emotionally. Like, a sex worker wasn't going to put them down, wasn't going to reject them for a start, and then wasn't going to put them down, and all those things. But also what they didn't realize, or maybe they did, but we didn't discuss it, but I've realized it since, that the very action of realizing they needed to have good sex to help them with these issues. And then how do you go about getting good sex? You do this research, you find the way of doing it, you go through it. It's scary, it's new, and it seems like nobody else is doing this, and it seems really outrageous, but you do it anyway. That kind of process for the women is how they became sexually empowered. You don't have to buy the services of a sex worker to do that, but the process of working out that that's what you needed, and then working out how to go about it, that's empowering. When you know how to make your body feel great, you can have that power, which will drive you in the rest of your life, like give you confidence in your other relationships. You walk different, you talk different, you work in a different way when you are confident with your body's functions. So, yeah.
I love that. which of course leads to your great book, SLUTDOM. Let's talk about the word slut for a bit, because I'm a big believer that, so when the Good Girl Confessional started its life many moons ago as a blog back in the day where there were bloggers, and the whole thing was about my experience of sex, dating and relationships as a woman in her 40s who was suddenly divorced and whatever, and going through that journey of dating, of sex, of whatever. And I was pretty out there when I was writing about this, and I was pretty raw and honest about what was going on. But in the course of doing that, I copped a lot of backlash, and I used to get like these lovely comments from, keyboard warriors, nameless, faceless people who felt the need to judge, especially from the Bible Belt across America. And of course, the word slut was thrown at me many, many times. And one day I just decided I was claiming it. And I wrote about that in the blog and basically said, I'm a slut and I'm happy to be a slut. And just kind of just really like clung to it. Because I felt that in doing that, it took away the power of other people to judge me. They could judge me, but it took away the power of how it would impact me. And I think that was the main thing. And in doing that, what was really great was I had all these lovely, lovely women who were following the blog who would then contact me, like, they were slipping into my DMs saying, I'm so grateful that you said that, because, I get slut shamed because I like to have sex, or I'm dating lots of people, or whatever. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the word slut and about embracing it and really taking away the negative connotations around the word.
Thank you. That is such a great, such an important message. I'm really glad to hear your story too of evolution. I think I like to ask women, like, I like to talk about the idea of reclaiming the word slut, and intellectually so many women can come with us and take that on. But then when I ask the same women if they're ready to self-identify as a slut, no. And, I feel great compassion for women who are at that place where they intellectually understand something but emotionally recoil, because that is the lifetime of conditioning that women have received. Women get shamed for sex in ways that men don't. And that, I believe, is what underpins all of gender equality. We can fight for gender equality in every single way, but we have ignored or been too afraid or some other reason of the idea of being sexually equal. And we cannot have gender equality until we're sexually equal. And we can't be sexually equal until we stop shaming women or anyone, but particularly women. And, that's going to take generations to happen. But as every woman does reclaim the word slut and identify as a slut, that's where it stops. If you can do that, the slut shaming ends in your generation. So that's why we need to do it. But forgot where I was going.
It's interesting,
Sorry.
is it? Like our bodies and our sexuality are demonized as women. We all know that. It's also but it's also weaponized and used against us in so many ways. We only need to look at the moment about what's going on in America, about abortion laws, about Roe versus Wade. We being like ripped back to the 1950s. I think it's pretty evident that as women, our bodies are weaponized against us, which of course is our entire being. Women, we are built this way. We can't help that we're born and built this way, but it's weaponized against us, right?
Yeah, it is. There's something about sexuality in our bodies. You know how, because it's so primal, like it's a hunger for food, it's a hunger for sex has often been compared to the hunger for food and the skin hunger that we feel that we need for intimate connection. To demonize something for women and not men that is so integral to our identity. And that's why it's so personal. When you are shamed for something, as you said, you cannot change. You are. It's human. But also to shame women it's not only to keep them subservient to men, it stops women from enjoying the full power of their bodies, because sex for humans it might be compared to food, but you can live without it though. So sex for humans happens outside of fertile periods, because sex is really important for our mental and physical health. And because of the shame that we've been inflicting on each other for 2,000 years, approximately, we can't really recognize how important sexual pleasure is for us in our forming of our identity, but also for our health in general. Like, good sex keeps you younger, and I know our audience today is primarily women who are a little bit older, and sex keeps you young. It keeps your skin healthy. It keeps your circulation going. It keeps the hormones up that makes you want to have more sex, which gives you vitality and more energy. And, it keeps your vagina lubricated and the muscles strong and pumping. And that's really important for our health. But we just gloss over it because, sex is hard and we don't want to talk about it. But, we've got to stop not talking about it. We've got to promote sex in general, but also that means we have to reclaim the slut as a really positive thing. And, even sex work skills, as we were talking before, are really positive skills. Like, being able to control your body, being able to have an orgasm when you want to, how you want to, with whom you want to, when you want to, all those things are really important for our health. And that's why sluts need to absolutely be celebrated and respected as people who are in charge. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we just need to take away the negative. So people say, as you said, yes, let's reclaim it, but do you want to be called a slut? No. I think that's because it's obviously got a negative connotation. But in actual fact, if we define slut, for example, as a person who just really enjoys sex and is quite comfortable in their own sexuality, then it becomes a really positive thing, right?
Yeah. And also, I think the whole argument really, if you strip it down, if you unpack it, the only reason to shame women for sex is to keep them subservient. And is that what we want? Are we prepared to shame other women so that we can all be subservient to men? This is not what we want. This is what patriarchy wants. And
That's exactly right. But that's really interesting too, is that the shame that women will put on other women about their sexual desires or the way that they behave or how many people they date or whatever. So my story before, interesting, when I was being called a slut when I was writing, the Good Girl Confessional, most of that came from women, came from other women. And what then was really fascinating to me was I started to understand the concept of the internalized misogyny, internalized patriarchy that a lot of women carry. And these views and these judgments that some women put on other women really comes from that place. We're so indoctrinated to take on the patriarchal view of the world that sometimes we don't even know that we're doing it. Unconscious bias, sometimes extraordinarily conscious bias. And it's for me that big issue is breaking that down, right?
It's the Madonna whore dichotomy, because we've been trained to want to be good girls, modest, demure, passive, so that we can please men. This is how we have been trained. And if we are not as modest as someone else, then we feel bad. So climbing up onto a Madonna pedestal is really hard work to stay on that pedestal, because not only have you got to suppress your own feelings about or own desires and be that passive player, you have to maintain your position. Women have been put in a position of being competitive in a race to the top of the Madonna pedestal, and while at the same time men are trained to be competitive to the top of the the sexual stud pedestal. So that kind of inequity underlies everything. But it's why women have so much trouble supporting other women, because they've got to stay on the pedestal themselves.
Yeah. I think too, there's a whole thing, and this actually plays into my wheelhouse. I'm extraordinarily passionate about this, about how women, society has taught us to compete rather than collaborate with other women. And that I'm very passionate about breaking down that as well, and saying, magic happens. I truly believe this. I say it a lot. Magic really happens when you get a group of women in a room where there's no competition and we're all just being ourselves, and we're collaborating, we're sharing stories, and the power of stories is extraordinary, because women are very good at actually being very intimately close with other women. We are more honest about where we came from, our past, our history, our stories. We share them in a way that quite often men don't. I'm not saying all men, obviously, but it seems to be more of a female thing. And when that happens and you break down the bullshit, then really magic happens. You want to start to lift other women up, right? You really want.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Women have potential to have great relationships. And I think there is actually something that something about that patriarchal narrative about women want to, I've heard this so many times, women want to talk with someone before they have sex with them, and men want to have sex with someone before they can talk to them. And although as a sex worker I can tell you that after sex men want to talk, which I've found that's where I really feel like I've become rich, listening to all of men's or my clients of all genders and their deepest vulnerabilities in those moments. So I think the fact that women are told that we have this ability to nurture each other, I think that is a great permission giving for us to do that. But I think something that we forget when we enjoy that about other women is that men aren't given that permission. And if men are told that the only way that they can have that emotional intimacy is through sex, then I think we need to be more compassionate about the fact that men say they want sex all the time, and it's not, they're trying to fulfill their masculine identity that they're supposed to do, while we're allowed to talk and love each other in in any way, because, you know, that's out fulfilling our feminine roles. So that is something that I do love about women, but I recognize that it's unfair for men too. And that's why I think that SLUTDOM is a book that really would appeal to everyone, because even though I really want women to become more sexually empowered, it's for the benefit of everyone that should happen.
Yeah, look, I completely agree that this book is for everyone. I don't think it's just for women to read. I think it's for everyone to read. And I think it doesn't really matter either about your sexuality either, how you identify. I think, like, in terms of, you know, if you're gay, straight, indifferent, doesn't really matter. This book really, I think, is going to appeal to so many people. And you're right, like you touched on just before, that that our listeners here today, that my beautiful audience are generally, not always, we do have younger women, which I love, but a lot of the women who listen to this podcast, a lot of people who listen, are 40, 50, 60 and over, and a lot of them will be going through this perimenopause, menopause journey. And I think the discussion around sex during this time is just so important, that you can enjoy sex, and that maybe it might look different, and the things that bring you pleasure might be different than the things that brought you pleasure in your 30s. But I think it's really important to have that conversation as well, you know, that there is no age limit on the enjoyment of sex, right?
Yeah, well, it just has so many health benefits. For us to believe that there are limits, that, you know, older people don't like sex, that kind of narrative that we hear often, I think that's really damaging to people too, because you know, it's a life force. Libido is a life force, and we do have a libido problem because of all this shaming about sex, and we're living way too long. If we're going to go through menopause in our 50s and live till we're in our 90s, we're going to the menopause in evolutionary terms is meant to slow us down and prepare us for the next stage of life, and many people falsely believe that winding down sex is part of that, especially because the body might make a drier vagina, and the vagina tissue, you know, when you don't use it, you lose it. So, you know, one of my participants in my study talked about the cobwebs in her vagina. So, you know, if we have these kinds of narratives and we talk ourselves out of the pleasures of sex for 40 years, you know, that's kind of really unfair, and not good for our population at all. So I think we just really need to change the narratives about how important sex is for us at all stages of our lives. And you know, it doesn't have to be penetrative. Like, it's pleasure in your body. Our bodies, unfortunately, being alive is pretty painful. I have a chronic health condition myself, but you know, for most people, getting older is painful. And you know, when our bodies give us pain, that's a message from our bodies. But that's a pendulum, and the pendulum can swing straight back into pleasure if we allow it. If we give ourselves permission to have pleasure, we're going to offset that pain. That's what we're designed to do. But we're talking each other out of it. Our cultural norms are taking this away from us. That's just not how our bodies are designed to be. And I know that religion is a patriarchal tool, and religion is part of the reason why we have these negative. Many religions give us negative views about sex, but really, it's kind of, I find that kind of weird, because, you know, when we always call out, oh God, and the moment, you know, it must be the closest thing. If a higher power was in charge, surely that higher power would want us to enjoy the kinds of pleasures that would help us believe further in the higher power, but also help us to live longer, better lives. Why would a higher power want to take that away from us? The religious narrative about sex negativity is very confusing.
Yeah, very true. And I also think, Sheila, you're right about, sorry, my camera's gone off, as you can see. So I'm just trying to turn it back on as we're talking. We'll see if it comes back. Here I am. I'm here. I think too, yeah, you're right. And I think that also, you know, getting back onto the perimenopause thing, one of the big stigmas is the lack of conversation around this, the lack of what does it look like? Because you're right, you know, I'm in the grip of perimenopause, you know, I face the dry vagina, but it doesn't mean I don't want to have sex. And it's a huge shock to the system, right? So then it's like, hang on, I used to want sex quite often and now I don't want it all the time. And I, you know, but it's, as you say, it's a physiological thing. And I think being able to openly discuss it and have those conversations with your friends, with your doctor, with your partner, with whomever, I think is really important, because that helps you psychologically get through, you know, and figure out, well, what does it look like for me now? What does sex look like now? And can I still have pleasure? Yes, you can. You know, it's just, as I said, it's just changing your worldview, I think, a little bit, and going, all right, well, we'll change it up.
Yeah, I think I hear so many women who have turned themselves off because it's the sex they were offered or the sex they thought that they could have was not pleasing to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or for any other reason, they've turned themselves off and they feel relieved that they never have to go through that again, or never have to use energy for that now, or to please someone else. And I think that's such a great shame about the way that sex has been sold to women as something that we do for a man, to make them comfortable, to look after them, for someone else, you know. And our own pleasure has not been prioritized. So I feel like, you know, it's such a great shame. And something that I've been thinking about lately is often when I'm with a male client who has in that postcoital state and we're talking very deep and meaningful, they'll say things like their wives won't have sex anymore with them and they feel really lonely, really sad. And they don't want to be angry at their wives, but they have a need for themselves. And they say to me, you know, that they're angry with their wives for this situation. And most of them have got no idea that women go through our whole lives with a very, very different messages about how we should be as sexual beings than men. Like, they just don't even realize that firstly we have to look after our safety every time we think about who we're going to have sex with, our physical safety and emotional safety, sexual safety. But we also have to be careful of our reputations and all of those body shaming messages that we've had over our lives. So all these things on our minds. And I just really don't think the majority of men understand that women have such different expectations on them about sex. So I try in those postcoital moments to help men understand where their wives are coming from and to not shame them further for not wanting sex, because they've been shamed out of it. So to shame them further is actually really detrimental to their relationship. So I like to think I'm that little voice in their head that makes them go home to their wives and not be angry that they're not having sex with them, but to be more empathic of why it's bigger than the relationship. It's about a woman's relationship with all of our culture and society, not just a woman's relationship with a person that might affect whether or not they want to have sex with that person.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think that there's a lot of, you know, this is the thing about education on both sides, right? Is that a lot of women want to be hugged and cuddled and kissed and you know, all of those things outside of the bedroom, outside, away from, you know,
without
sex.
the
They want
pressure.
to right? They want to feel cherished and loved. Like, it's not just about the sex, honey. But a lot of men, as you say, express their affection, love, intimacy, all of those things through the act of sex. And I think that that's kind of on both sides. I think if you know, men are more understanding of women who, like, why has she pulled away? Why isn't she wanting to have sex? Rather than, oh, she just doesn't want to have sex with me. You know, there's sort of bigger questions in there, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say then. But anyway,
That's okay, because I was going to say, coming back to SLUTDOM, coming back to this for a little bit, it's really interesting because, I was just reading here, like a global study found that 50% of women have been slut shamed, 50%, and 20% of men. Like, that's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. And I put it in there because that's what the study found. But my own feelings are that 100% of women have been slut shamed, and 100% of gay men have been slut shamed, and maybe some other men, maybe some straight men have been slut shamed, maybe more so now when since the Me Too movement, and we're talking about consent as being so important, and I think I really think, how do we define slut shaming? I think that, if you watch a little child, like 2, 3-year-old, dancing to music, YouTube, and they're really cute because they're sexy, but they don't know that yet. They don't know what that means. And it's really cute. But then that same child starts dancing sexy in the supermarket, and everyone's like, oh, don't do that. Don't let anyone see you be sexy. And, that's the beginning. Even when a woman's pregnant, maybe that's the beginning of when we start shaming our assigned female people about sex in different ways than we shame men. It's so insidious. And I think every rom-com, every Disney movie, everything we receive is telling us that women should be good. And that means keeping our sexuality private and in the bedroom and only in the correct ways. And I think, I think slut shaming is so much broader than just calling someone a slut. So, it's such a subjective thing.
Agreed. I think it's like, we saw, like, the rise of when, Sex in the City first came out, and it was based obviously on the column that had been written. And it was almost like, it was like a revelation. It was like all these women going, oh yeah, I identify with that character or that character or that character or whatever. Samantha Jones in Sex in the City is a perfect example, I think, of, a brilliant character that was woven out of the fabric of however many women, so many women. And her just basically embracing her sexuality, embracing her love of sex, like so many things. I think that show gave a lot of women permission to actually, talk about sex, embrace that they really enjoyed sex and sexuality. And we all laughed. There were so many moments in that show, I think I laughed at because I was like, oh my God, that's happened to me. Like, it's quite funny. But I think we need more of that, as you say, rather than the rom-com where, there's always the funny, so-called bad, I put that in inverted commas, girlfriend, of the main character who's the good girl.
So you can live vicariously through the bad one. Yeah.
Right?
Girlfriends. I know.
Exactly right. I was probably the bad girlfriend. I don't know. It's really interesting, people's perceptions. I was actually I was in the car and I was listening to a radio program the other day, and they had someone call in. So they have people call in, I guess, and tell their innermost thoughts or secrets, and they go, is this right or wrong? It was a young woman who was a stripper, and she called in to say, yes, I'm a stripper. That's my full-time job, basically. And she was 6 months pregnant and still stripping. And did people think this was okay or not okay? Now, she clarified that all of her clients, when she went out to do these, because she goes to like bucks parties, etc., and she was going out, but she does this through an agency, by the way, and all of the clients know that she's pregnant. This is not a surprise. She doesn't just turn up on the doorstep and suddenly, hello, and I'm pregnant. Everybody knows. And in actual fact, she said, strangely, she's getting paid a lot more money now that she's pregnant than she was getting paid before the pregnancy. But her thing was, do you think it's still okay for me to be stripping at 6 months? It was fascinating hearing people call into this radio program and actually talk about their views about whether she should or she shouldn't. Now, most people who called in were women, and most of these women were like, yeah, you go, girl. This is your body. Everybody else, every other pregnant woman gets to work right up until they have a baby if they choose to, or if they're physically able to. So why not you as a stripper? But
and
as you can...
money.
Right, but she's getting paid more money. And she said one of the she keeps doing it because she's like, well, I earn a lot of money. And, she must be a good stripper because she's earning lots of money, good for her, and wants to earn as much money as she can, clearly, so she can take some time off to spend quality time with Bub when the baby comes along. And she said, look, I don't think I'll be doing it right up until I have the baby, but right now I'm physically fit. I feel great. My doctor's knows what I do for a living, and they're all like, yep, go for it. Physical activity, dancing is really healthy and all of those things. But it was fascinating hearing the one or two people that called in and went, this is so wrong. You're so wrong. Everything you're doing is wrong. And I was like, wow. People have they were really passionate about their response. They have these very ingrained kind of feelings about what's right, projection about what's right and wrong in our society.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a sad indictment of how our society trains us to be. I'm sure those women who were so negative got off the call and felt good about themselves because
I agree.
they were securing their place on the pedestal. And
you could hear that.
Not an individual's fault. We need to take collective action, and that's why I really advocate for SLUTDOM, where we can really reclaim the word, because all of us need to move together on rejecting the shaming of women. Yeah.
I agree. Well, I honestly cannot speak highly enough about this book and about you, Hilary. I honestly hope that everybody goes out, buys this book, has a read. I think it's a really fascinating subject. It's a brilliant book. And I think it's really important, as you so rightly say, that collectively we are, as women and as everyone, really, as a society, we need to collectively really embrace conversations around slutdom, around the word slut, around our sexuality, right? I think it's really important.
Thank you. That's why I'd really like to get the hashtag SLUT2 off the ground, because the hashtag Me Too movement, it showed us how broad was sexual assault, which was very, very important. But it also showed us what it cost us to be silent. We were shamed out of admitting that we'd been sexually assaulted. And now we're not, because the Me Too movement has changed so much. There's no shame in having been sexually assaulted. There should be shame for the people who did that to us. Me Too movement did that. And that's why I actually think the SLUT2 movement can do the same for de-shaming, for removing the silence about sex itself, and particularly for women. So, thank you so much, Sandy, for giving me that opportunity to promote the hashtag.
I just wanted to say congratulations again on this extraordinary book. I'm going to put all the links up where everyone can find this book. It's amazing. Congratulations to you. I personally see a TED talk coming on. I hope that's on the cards for you, because I would watch it over again. I watch it many times. I think you're brilliant. I love your courage. Thank you for sharing your story so openly and honestly. Thanks for sharing your story of being a sex worker. And thank you for helping so many people out there to reclaim themselves as sluts or not, but to reclaim their sexuality. I think it's really important. Thank you. I think you're brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandy. It's been so good talking to you. Thank you.
Oh, it's been amazing. I think you're brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening along to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm really thrilled and excited that the Good Girl Confessional podcast is part of the WB40 Women Beyond 40 platform, a platform we created for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond to share their hard-won wisdom and to learn more information about the things that matter to us as women, midlife and beyond. Now, wherever you're listening to this podcast, I would be hugely grateful if you can follow, like and subscribe, because it helps the algorithm to actually reach more more like-minded women. And they will realise that they're not alone in their journey, that's for sure. You might also like to know that we're over on YouTube. Join us there, The Good Girl Confessional. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as both The Good Girl Confessional and Women Beyond 40. And we're over on TikTok under Women Beyond 40. I would also like to thank the editor and producer of the podcast, Michael Smedley. As always, what a brilliant person. And thank you so much for listening along. I love you. Thanks for your support, and we'll see you soon.